It's the mid-2000s. The mega hit that is Gundam Seed Destiny has ended its 50-episode run on TV, and with it, a flurry of discussions ran amok amongst viewers from its conclusion. With a follow-up OVA and some compilation movies later, came the anticipated news. A sequel movie was to be made. This was to be expected. Too many questions were left unanswered, and Bandai would surely never press the brakes on such a popular anime that ushered in a generation of new Gundam fans. A few years pass, and sadly the project was officially on hold after the head writer Chiaki Murasawa was experiencing health problems that halted production. More years go by, and the hopes of a Gundam Seed film was beginning to dissipate with fewer and fewer updates. An HD remaster project celebrating its 10-year anniversary in 2012, Crossange in 2014, Murasawa's death in 2016. The idea of a movie even happening was now dead in the water. A rumor here, a whispering there, would float around every once in a while, a feeble reminder to us that the project did exist at some point, but deep down inside, we all knew that it wasn't going to happen. It's now 2021. Suddenly, an announcement. The headline, Gundam Seed Ignited, a project in commemoration of 20 years since the Gundam Seed anime. Several days later, a confirmation from director Fukuda, the response we've been looking forward to. The film will indeed be a sequel to Seed Destiny.
人は忘れる。そして繰り返す。こんなことはもう二度としない。一体誰が言えるんだ。撃たねばならんのだ。守りたい世界があるんだ。だが君は裏切り者の子で、甘い毒に踊らされ、一体どれほどの時を戦い続けてきた。
力はただ力だ。
力だけが僕の全てじゃない。わからぬさ。
でもだから人は生きてきたんだろう。僕たちの世界は。
Finally, it has come to fruition. The long-awaited movie that no one's expected to happen after almost 2 decades of development hell and a global pandemic. He has risen. Our Father, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Yamato, has risen to grace us once again with his almighty presence when we all thought hope was lost and darkness had prevailed. Afterwards, the title of the movie was revealed. Gundam Seed Freedom, because it's not like we've had enough of freedom in the TV shows, both figuratively and literally. Perhaps the most uninspiring, predictable choice of a title, yet a welcome one nonetheless. 2000s mecha nostalgia is back on the menu, boys, but with upgraded 2024 technology. Then the worries kicked in. What would the story be? Will it be another rehash of the same plot? How will it carry on the legacy of both series after 20 years? Sure, it ended on an open note, but I'm just hoping it's going to be better than the original TV conclusion. Will Shin get the redemption arc that he deserves? Will the long-awaited question of space whales finally be addressed? Will the pink Wicked Witch of the West, Lacus Clyne, finally meet her match and die a horrible death? Okay, that last one was purely mine, but still. Snarky comments aside, my opinions on Gundam Seed and Seed Destiny as a whole have been all over the place since I first watched it on TV 20 years ago. If you've been subscribed to me for a while, you probably saw my old video on the series and inferred that I dislike the show based on my tone and deliverance, which you would be correct. I've started out as an ardent hater, going as far as to convincing newbies from watching it, because in my mind, why watch garbage when there's so much better stuff out there? Besides, the Universal Century is unmatched when it comes to presenting quality Gundam shows. But as I got older, the needle on my hateometer began to quiver with uncertainty as I started to begrudgingly enjoy it as a guilty pleasure comedy. And it wasn't until Seed Freedom was announced and leading up to its release that it was starting to firmly move towards the opposite side. After growing up with this series and 2 decades of hating it, loathing it, and discouraging it, it's all come full circle where I actually missed Seed and Seed Destiny.
しないの？なんで？
I missed the Mobile Suit battles consisting of 90% reused animation. I missed the excessive beam spam that would take up half the screen and its duplicated sound effects violating my eardrums every time. I missed seeing the Freedom acting overpowered and perform acrobatics as it dodged hordes of beam weapons. I miss the absolute nonsense and impractical outfits the characters would wear that would even be rejected by Final Fantasy designers. I miss this pseudo-deep, preachy jargon that amounts to nothing, yet the characters think is the most profound conversation they've ever had. And I cannot believe I'm saying this, but I miss the same face Hisashi Hirai designs that was so reminiscent of the 2000s sci-fi anime aesthetic that I was sick and tired of when I was young. Basically, I missed everything that made Seed and Sea Destiny. Well, Seed and Sea Destiny.
全てをそう言ってしまうなら、では我らがあがきながらも生きるその意味は。
全てのものは生まれ、やがて死んでいく。ただそれだけのことだ。
Being familiar with Fukuda's antics, my expectations for this film were simple. If it's half as insane as Crossange, then I'll be more than happy. And boy, did it deliver. After walking out of the theaters awestruck at what I just witnessed, here are some choice words that appropriately describe my feelings. Shameless, flagrant, outrageous, and brazen. This movie has been one of the most over-the-top, chaotic, chat-tastic, and cheesy viewing that ups the ante after each WTF moment one after another. An installment that was needed after it was in development limbo for so long that it almost left our memories. A work that's so blatant in its intentions that you cannot help but salute it for keeping to its guns. A creation that's so flawed that it's perfect, and it cemented itself as one of the best comedies I've watched, where I don't think I've laughed as hard or as frequent ever before. And it elicited such happy emotions for me that I had a goofy grin on my face the entire time because of how ridiculously self-aware this movie is. Mulaflaga was hit by a ship's positron laser twice and miraculously survived on both occasions? Let's kick it up a notch. This time, he gets hit by the Requiem, the beam's super weapon capable of destroying entire space colonies, that he somehow blocks with just his mobile suit. Oh, and he comes out unscathed too. Every single Hoko Kuwashima character dies? Someone must have noticed the Sean Bean curse, because this time Agnes lives. Both the Freedom and Strike Freedom were unfairly overpowered compared to the other mechs that made the battles one-sided. How about its quote-unquote real successor unit, the mighty Strike Freedom? Has a forehead laser like the Double Zeta Gundam that shoots a beam that can slice through entire military bases and disintegrate enemies at an atomic level. Luna is assigned the critical task of sniping down the nukes? Man, Compass must have forgotten the time when she channeled her inner stormtrooper by missing every single shot taken at Lord Jibril's escape aircraft. A naked force ghost that can somehow communicate with the living? What if I told you one of them lives rent-free in their heads and scares away the bad guys by turning into a giant monster-like apparition in front of them? Perhaps a throwback to the first Gundam? Seriously, you cannot make this stuff up. The amount of borderline parody moments shown in this movie is so transparent. There's no way the staff weren't leaning in on the jokes. Any semblance of logic and consistency that remained in the TV series simply do not apply anymore. Just pure feel and emotion meant to maximize fun and entertainment. But never at any point did I feel the movie was bashing me over the head with its nostalgia, and I think that was because most of the original creative team returned. Fukuda is a man of repetition, and if he likes something, he will continue to reintroduce it again in some way. In this case, it was completely warranted. There's a sense of comforting familiarity in Seed Freedom. The same actors, the same musical team, and the same production staff who brought the series to life all returned once again to ensure the film goes out with a bang. The same triumphant feeling you get after listening to a TM Revolution opening. The same melancholic sentiment you get from a Seesaw ending. The same lovable tokusatsu references. The same homage to the director's prior works. And of course, the same recycled animation redone in 3D CG all make their reappearances to remind us once again who's the boss. Sure, you get the same tired death flashbacks we saw for the millionth time, but at this point it's been so long and we've been conditioned to believe that this is an integral part of the Seed and Sea Destiny viewing experience. After all, it's been more than 15 years, and it's only natural we're reminded once again, Nickel did love to play the piano and died.
なら倒すしかないじゃないか。バカ野郎！なんでそんなことになる？なんでそんなことしなきゃならないんだよ！あいつはニコルを殺した。
The film's plot is obviously not the deepest, nor has the most compelling villains that challenges our beliefs, but it does integrate nicely into the overarching narrative spread throughout the Cosmic Era universe. A world thrown into chaos and a never-ending loop of conflict because of placing value on one's genetics. It's a contemporary twist on the new types versus old types in the universal century, and exploring the ethics behind genetic manipulation that will increasingly become a hotly debated topic in the near future. And like all recurring themes in Gundam, the strive to understand each other in spite of humanity's repeated failures is a common thread.
ならば仕方ない。次に戦う時は俺がお前を撃つ。僕もだ。
Beyond the humor and self-awareness, Seed Freedom is a movie of parallels. Orphe vs. Kira, Ingrid vs. Lacus, Shura vs. Athrun, Agnes vs. Luna, etc., etc. It's a what-if scenario if they had based the entirety of their self-worth on one's abilities and allowed their genes to predetermine their destiny. In the Kingdom of Foundation, might and power supersedes all. The Black Knights aren't the most exciting bunch of villains, but Ingrid by far is the most compelling one out of the bunch. She actively questions her purpose as an Accord, and we can sympathize with her struggles of fighting against her moral dilemma. She doesn't possess the fortitude of her female adversaries, and the environment she's in, along with her unfortunate attraction to Orphe, is what makes her character tragic. When she finally unloads her frustrations onto Lacus, we can feel the heartbreak in her voice. Despite having the chance to walk away from the Accords, Ingrid doesn't have the courage to break away from her genetic shackles to pursue her own chance at happiness, and that becomes her downfall.
もういいのよ、オルフェ。私は知っているから。
Shura is essentially what Athrun could have been if he abided both his father and Durandal's wishes as the perfect super soldier, win battles, never question the decision makers, and carry out orders without hesitation. And Orphe is the infantile, high and mighty version of Kira, who looks down on humanity due to his superior upbringing and destined role in society. Both are blessed with superior genetics beyond the average coordinator, but one was raised in a normal, loving environment, and the other was groomed for quote-unquote greatness to fulfill their supposed purpose. You could argue that Orphe and Shura are engaging in their own right, but their one-track minds is what holds them back. Their refusal to adjust and adapt accordingly is what ironically makes them more archaic compared to the rest of the human populace. Certainly not the types that the average person would want to be the lead characters in a story. All of this is quite cartoonish, but then again, this is Gundam Seed we're talking about.
いい加減あなたも自分の使命を自覚し、私の手を取ってはいかがです？
何度問われても答えは同じです。私が愛するのはあなたではありません。
キラ・ヤマトは死んだ。
Like many sequels to a long-running series, time is the biggest enemy when telling a story because of how compact it has to be. Seed and Seed Destiny had the luxury of having a combined total of 100 episodes to flesh out its world and characters, so it could afford to take its time and take a step back on some occasions. Even though I'd consider both series relatively fast-paced for a long-running show, Seed Freedom had to really step on the gas pedal, concerning the amount of ground it wanted to cover with an ensemble cast with many making their first appearance. 2 hours is just not enough to make sure everyone gets their time in the spotlight, even if it is the longest Gundam film to date. No detours, no lingering moments, no breathing room in between scenes that develop some characters that otherwise would be neglected to the wayside. Everything has to move in a breakneck speed to ensure the plot reaches from point A to B in a timely manner. Basically, imagine having to cut out the fat in a movie that had little to none to begin with.
ほら、お前も食えよ。このチリソースをかけて。
あいや、待った。ちょっと待った。ケバブにチリソースなんて何を言ってるんだ。このヨーグルトソースをかけるのが常識だろうが。
なんだお前は。見ず知らずの男に私の食べ方をとやかく言われる筋合いはない。
なんという。
ま
As much as Seed Freedom acts as the fixer and complete Seed Destiny for many, it also extended some of its long-standing issues stemming from the TV series, specifically concerning some of its characters either overreaching or overcorrecting in a short span. What's even more hilarious is that Fukuda himself was aware and sort of admitted this in a recent interview concerning Kira becoming too overpowered. Right, there was barely any dialogue that let his emotions show. We had a year-long break in between recordings, and the story takes place 2 years after the finale of Mobile Suit Gundam Seed, so though I had done a lot of exploration to that point, it was, in some ways, like a reset. That's what I wanted for the performance of Kira in Destiny. Problem is that he had grown into too strong of a character. Soichiro Hoshi and Kira became too important to the Seed series. When Kira is on screen, he devours the other characters. It all the more reinforces the belief that many shared on the criticism of Kira's portrayal in Seed Destiny. His role, and Lacus's, should have been reduced to a supporting one, or at least didn't usurp or interfere with the others, because their story had already wrapped up by then, and nothing more was needed to be explored. Like the Universal Century fans have pointed out before, Kira taking a step back like Amuro in Zeta Gundam would have been the better route, with the second half of Seed Destiny not coming off as a bait and switch. Amuro is definitely an important character who plays a key role in the story, but at no point did we ever feel that Camille was not the protagonist. Meanwhile, Kira and Lacus began stepping on the toes of others, even if they were doing just fine on their own. So much so that the up-and-comers who showed any promise were quickly jostled aside to make way for the original heroes, almost as if they're strong-arming to reclaim the throne, despite agreeing beforehand to pass the torch. I've never hated Shin for that reason, even in his lowest points. Maybe because I viewed him as a wasted opportunity and surrounded by bad people. He's like the troubled kid in school. You see the good in him and want him to succeed, but he has to take the first step to better himself. But once he finds his footing, he will thrive in a stable environment. Speaking of Shin, he's another case of this overreaching as a result of redeeming his character too late in the series. I can understand that at his core he's a bit of a goofball. We've seen flashbacks of his younger self when he was portrayed as the happy, outgoing kid without much of a care in the world. I'm sure a lot of people would have loved to see that fun side of him come out once in a while in Seed Destiny to demonstrate that he's more than just a one-dimensional ball of teenage angst who crafted his entire personality on letting people know how much he hates Orb. Shin is someone who is extremely driven and strives to be praised by his superiors, evident by him latching onto Durandal's every word, and eventually that same admiration passing on to Kira.
Shin, Millenniumを頼むよ。はい。
Maybe that's why I was willing to be more forgiving of him, because one needs to hit rock bottom first before embarking on the road to redemption. But it's kinda impossible to do this when his awakening moment is in the latter half of the final episode. In the movie, the writers course-corrected too hard to the point where he acts like his pre-war self just a year after the events of Seed Destiny, to the point of being the comic relief character and jokingly referred to as Kira's attack chihuahua. Arguably, Shin has the most unfortunate backstory out of the main cast. He witnessed his entire family exterminated, and by extension lost all his emotional support at once. Seed Destiny makes it clear he still hasn't mentally recovered from that horror years later, and took his anger out on those he felt wronged him. On top of that, was manipulated by the chairman and one of his supposed best friends into carrying out their distorted version of a utopian world. Yet, Shin's the most free-spirited and lively one out of the bunch in the movie.
なんなんすかね、あいつら。
Keep in mind, this mental change is not as minor as adjusting your perspective. It's having to overcome years of trauma and the proper rehabilitation to slowly build that individual back up. You'd think after enduring all that tragedy and manipulation, he'd be more reserved, or at least a little bit more cautious a year after the conclusion of Seed Destiny. To discuss this anime to an extent, it's almost unavoidable to not mention director Fukuda and head writer Murasawa due to how deeply ingrained they are with this series. When it's a husband and wife duo in charge of the story and direction, it's safe to assume that this is a very personal project to them. At its core, the Gundam Seed trilogy is an adolescent love story, limited to a small circle of characters despite its large scale. The anime is in this weird mid-ground where it feels like it sometimes clashes with its own identity. Does it want to be a super robot show or a romantic drama? Criticisms of their management aside, Fukuda to this day is still eager to talk about the series, collects merchandise, and actively engages with fans, even though some of his answers can anger them in the process. And no, I don't believe that either of them hated any of their cast members, nor pulled strings behind the scenes to sabotage production. Because in the eyes of many, what was a narrative of teenagers trying to navigate the hell that is war, the sequel was, to their surprise and disappointment, reduced to a cantankerous love drama. And that sudden shift in tone and direction can contribute to negative speculation and rumors.
もうこの機会だからこのラジオでもちゃんと言っとくよ。なんかこう毎回こういうガンダムとかのイベントとか、あとなんか NHK さんのガンダム三昧みたいなのでなんかこう電話つないだ時になんかちょっと聞かれるのがガンダムシードデスティニーのそのこう最後にエンドクレジットが須村さん新飛鳥主人公のはずなのになんかこうキラヤマトに抜かれてなんかこうキャストの順が変わったのすごいお怒りですよねみたいな雰囲気のこと言われるのよ。でなんか勝手に僕がめちゃ怒ってるみたいな雰囲気になってるんだけど何にも思ったことがないんだよね。俺普通にオンエア見てたけどキラ一番だよねって普通に思って見てたし何にも思わなかった。それに対して怒るとかそういうのなくて。なんかよくある話じゃん。そのなんかさお芝居のチラシのさキャストの順番が気に食わなくて降板したとかいう人がいるとかそういうのがなんか都市伝説的に世の中に流れているもんだから役者は全員そういうことを起こるもんだっていうふうに思われてるんだけど本当全く思ってないんですよね。本当に何にも起こってないのにだから今回なんかこう出るのになんか先にキラーとかが発表されてたからなんかこう須田さんなんか怒ってるんじゃないですかねみたいなこと言われたら嫌だなとか思ってたけど全く思ってないんですよね。だからよろしければこれを拡散していただきたいという。
If you ever get the chance, I recommend watching the NHK documentary celebrating the anime's 20th year. It's a fascinating look in not just these two, but they also interview key staff members and providing their insight on the series and Bandai's mindset of the franchise coming into the new millennium. If Fukuda was the in-your-face, action-oriented arm that kept your eyes entertained to the screen, Morosawa was the abstract, sensitive half, giving the emotional voice to the series it subsequently became well known for. In other words, the feminine touch. Whether you agree or disagree with them, it's obvious they know what works well, and know how to stir up discussion among watchers, especially in today's rapidly changing media landscape. I'm not going to dwell too much on the bad parts of Seed and Seed Destiny, since I'm sure there's more than enough people who are willing to sit you down and explain every single detail of its pitfalls. Instead, I'm going to talk about what I'm interested in.
そう他人行儀な礼をしてくれるんだ。
What's important to note is that Fukuda's main concerns aren't about maintaining scientific accuracy or having an airtight story. His specialty isn't being in-depth on exploring the depths of humanity and its intricate political systems, or contemplating the ethics and implications of the Mirage colloid, or how a pilot can survive getting directly stabbed in the chest by a beam sword, or even detailing exactly how a peace treaty between superpowers concerning nuclear-powered weapons is laid out. His intention is to entertain with as much pizzazz and flair, style over substance of what's happening in the moment. The camera angles, the dynamic mecha poses, and combat choreography, when it's not being reused for the millionth time, are pretty cool. Watching the Seed trilogy through a stone-cold, rational lens won't give you much value. It's all about the feels and maximizing opportunities to bring those emotions out in that moment.
あすら逃げ母さん僕のピアノ
If you're a Gundam fan, think of some memorable scenes in the entire franchise. Chances are, one of them at least are from the Seed trilogy. the strike making its official debut by rising from the wreckage. The freedom and justice holding hands as one reaches out to its brother unit in their determination to stay together. So Moe. Papa Arthur sunsets himself while giving the proverbial middle finger to the world as his daughter watches in horror of his death. Strike vs. Aegis, a showdown fueled by hatred and anguish between childhood friends. Kira and Athrun meeting face to face again, so close, yet so far. Separated only by a wire fence, yet they're on the opposing side as enemies, and far from the happy reunion they had hoped for. Kigali and Athrun's confession and kiss, one of the top 10 romantic scenes not just in Gundam, but in anime. A beautiful buildup of music, acting, and cinematography, having the Earth as the backdrop, Athrun using zero gravity to his advantage, and no one to disturb this precious moment before they depart for the battlefield. The sword impulse making its flashy entrance by twirling its two anti-ship swords to assert dominance, only to reveal its Shin Asuka from earlier. Kigali's abduction by the Freedom during her wedding ceremony, and putting the term wedding crashers to a whole new meaning. The Strike Freedom making its debut going full beam spam by disarming a platoon of mobile suits in classic Kira fashion. The list goes on, but the point is, Fukuda's principle is the rule of cool. Him and his team understand how to build up a scene with a combination of theatrics, flashbacks, and music to maximum effect. Even revisiting years later, it's kinda amazing how easy it is to watch Gundam Seed one episode after another. The show does a good job at pulling you in immediately, and depending on who you ask, it's either because they cannot stop watching the impending train wreck they're about to witness, or what stunt they will pull off next. There's always something going on in the background that demands your attention, and this is no easy task for a 50-episode TV series. Then there is Murasawa. Many attribute her to be the main reason why Seed, and especially its sequel, fails as a story, and I used to have those sentiments as well, but I started to enjoy other aspects that I overlooked when I was younger, and dare I say it, has some nuance in her writing.
だがこのドックにいれば大丈夫。だからな。
でも私大丈夫ですから。私大丈夫ですから。だから置いていかないでください。
As I mentioned before, she was the sensitive counterpart to Fukuda by emphasizing more on interpersonal relationships, even though some of it gets lost in translation because of the fan service. I know that some classify both shows as a soapy teen drama, but I try to shy away from that label because, to me at least, there are negative connotations of it being shallow due to its targeted demographic. Is it soapy? Definitely. But what it tries to tackle about adolescent growing pains, especially in Seed Destiny, I think would get lost in a teenager's mind. Or at least, I didn't pick up on it until I was much older. Maybe I'm just dead inside. Little things like Mayrin having body image issues and feeling inferior to her older sister is part of the reason why she was so infatuated with Athrun. It's a one-sided crush that ultimately doesn't amount to anything, but it does explain why she was so willing to help him defect from Zaft, even if it meant risking her life.
ありがとう。でもなぜ？
わからない。
Meanwhile, Luna is confident and outgoing, someone who Mayrin wants to be, yet can't even muster up the courage and approach Athrun like her older sister. Luna may be pushy and overt in her fascination with him, but she isn't clueless. Notice that she completely backed off after eavesdropping on his tense conversation with Kira and Kigali. She now knows the truth behind the fake Lacus, and why his interactions with Mir Campbell were so awkward. Despite that, she tried to console him in her own way, even if those assumptions were wrong.
私はアスランにもっと頑張ってもらいたいだけです。アスランは優しすぎますよ。そういうところも好きですけど。損ですよ。
I do find it amusing that Agnes is basically the extreme version of Luna in the first half of Seed Destiny. Both had a crush and made not-so-subtle passes on their commander, despite being common knowledge they weren't single. Except Luna matured out of this phase relatively quickly, whereas Agnes allowed it to fester and become a part of her personality. Speaking of fake and misguided,
私はラクスクラインです。
let's talk about Mira Campbell's pitiful existence. She started out pretty harmless and surprisingly self-aware. She accepted her situation and understood the reality of being a political pawn. The job may be temporary and she's just a substitute, but that was fine as long as she got the acknowledgement and fame in exchange. That is, until the identity crisis kicked in. She realized that people adore her not because she's Mira Campbell, but the woman she's impersonating as. Mira was a nobody prior to her physical transformation. Her only standout quality was sounding identical to her idol, Lacus Clyne. She may have nailed the look on the outside, but the two could not be any more different on the inside. The real Lacus can captivate the audience just by being herself, for she is the embodiment of human perfection. If only we knew the reason why. People love her because her words are sincere, she carries herself well in the public spotlight, and tirelessly advocates for a peaceful world. But everything Mira does is secondhand and contrived. Her speeches are read from a script written by political advisors. Her outfits are salacious and provocative to garner attention from viewers.
それに今度衣装もなんかバリバリ。
そうそう。そしたらさ、胸結構あんのな。
And she's resorted to, let's say, underhanded tactics, vying for Atherin's affections instead of winning him over with a genuine soul and personality like a certain blonde-haired woman did.
本当だ。
Mira Campbell was an unfortunate victim, a girl with low self-worth who thought the genie, aka Durandal, granted her wish but was actually handed a curse. She's an example of how good intentions can eventually morph into something grotesque and unrecognizable.
私はラクスよ。
いいや。
違う。私はラクスなの。役割だっていいじゃない。ちゃんとやれば、そうやって生きたっていいじゃない。
And no other character in the C trilogy embodies this more than Flay, the poster child of the jealous girlfriend and honestly one of the highlights of the entire series. There is no I can fix her solution to her, because she will get you fixed first.
Wait! Who wants to get fixed?
She may be one of the most absolutely despicable characters in the Gundam franchise, but Flay is an example that being a hated character does not equate to bad writing. Because lover or hater, she was three things. The bringer of spice and drama when needed, was the necessary counterbalance to the overwhelming good aboard the Archangel, and one of the better portrayals of a war victim.
そうよ。みんなやっつけてもらわなくちゃ。
Flay's an interesting case because she's fighting her own war that's not on the battlefield, but with herself after having to live with the consequences of her actions from striking a deal with the devil. She manipulated Kira to do her bidding in killing coordinators by offering her body, and ironically fell hard for the guy she set out to personally destroy. This naturally shattered her engagement with Sai that isolated her further from his group. Meanwhile, a camaraderie was forming on the ship as the crew members acclimated to their environment and learned to rely on each other during hard times. Ever notice that the majority of her scenes on the Archangel after Kira's disappearance, Flay was either alone or accompanied only by Birdie? She may have enlisted in the military, but no one orders her what to do, nor does anyone bother to come over and ask her how she's doing. To the crew, she's a lost cause, a persona non grata. Before her father's death, Flay could afford to be bratty and get away with it. Because of his social standing, he protected her from the cruelties of the outside world, while Sai's the fiancé played mediator between herself and Kira's friends to maintain goodwill. But now that she's on a level playing field, she's left to fend on her own where the name Ulster no longer has any worth on the bargaining table. When Flay notices Kira is getting closer to the new girl on the ship, she immediately assumes the worst and believes that Kigali's out to steal him away from her. If only she knew. Flay knows deep down she can't offer him much beyond her body. She can't hold up a conversation with anyone unless it involves pointing the finger at someone else. She haphazardly tried to get back together with Sai, but in her classic Flay fashion, failed spectacularly after being called out on her denial.
私、本当はキラのことなんか。
いい加減にしろよ。 君はキラのことが好きだったろ？違わないさ。
It's an ironic twist how Nataral eventually became her source of refuge on the Dominion, as she too was ostracized during her time on the Archangel from clashing with the crew on her strictness with military protocol. Flay is the foil to Lacus and Kigali, girls who connected with Kira because they treat him as a human first and not as a weapon for their self-interests. Their rocky relationship was born from two people broken by war, not with the mutual goal of supporting each other, but as a quick fix to their problems that was doomed to fail. Flay's demise is a cautionary tale, a character who threw her life away for a short-lived revenge, clouded by an irrational hatred. She's someone who garners little to no sympathy, who arguably only redeemed herself by dying. Although Kira and Lacus are the ships of the series, I have to talk about best guy and girl of the Cosmic Era, so much so that I have to dedicate a giant portion of this video for them, and the reason why I was able to muscle through Seed Destiny. Ladies and gentlemen, Athrun and Kigali.
だからこんなとこで一人でうじうじしてないで。
ごめん。
ごめんって、お前。
いや、だから、ごめん。
Aina and Shiro from 8th MS team might have done it before them, but these two perfected the enemies to lovers trope. A pair whose love language doesn't need the conventional smotherings and overbearing I love yous uttered to their partners to know how much they mean to each other. Prior to the film's release, I know a lot of people preferred if their romance halted at the end of Seed when things were at a high point for them. But I disagree with that opinion because, like all good and lasting relationships, there must be both the good and the bad, aka the pain and suffering, as it allows them to grow and overcome those past mistakes. I'm sure we are all aware, love is not an effortless, one-way journey. It's an unending process of trust and communication that requires both parties to be proactive. Oftentimes it's convoluted, dead ends disguised as detours, and it's not uncommon for you to be racked with second thoughts and what-ifs. Amusingly, whether it was intentional or not, Seed Destiny actually portrayed these dilemmas quite well. A recurring trait that all my favorite characters possess is their strong sense of responsibility that takes priority over their personal happiness. They are willing to sacrifice their security to work towards a long-term goal, despite knowing full well it will hurt them personally, at least in the short run. Whether that purpose is self-serving or for others, I think it's an admirable quality that represents a character's loyalty and commitment to a cause. These two are no different. Athrun and Kigali are a textbook example of opposites attract, and you can immediately sense the chemistry from their first encounter. The austere and uptight Athrun playing only by the rules versus the wayward, spontaneous Kigali who breaks all traditions of decorum and expected behavior of her social status.
てめえ！いや、だったんだよねって言おうとしただけだよ。同じだろうが、それじゃ！
This is a relationship that was built on the premise of overcoming major adversity at every corner. Both come from political prestige, but are uninterested in taking advantage of their names for personal gains, and opt to dive in headfirst into the front lines. Athrun as a Zaft pilot, and Kigali as part of a resistance group of guerrilla fighters. Both deal with the motif of dealing with the burden of their father's legacy, and are people of action eager to play their part in keeping the peace. Their shared personal tragedies encourage them to lean on each other during hard times and uncertainties, and factors out of their control trying to pull them apart are some of the reasons why they've grown so close together. Personality-wise, they couldn't be any more different. She's a tomboy, free-spirited, rebellious, and outspoken with her words that can sometimes come off as insensitive.
だいたいなんでお前、コーディネーターなんだよ。
He's introverted, reserved, and largely aloof, that makes it difficult to befriend others apart from polite exchanges. As funny as it is to meme about Athrun's love pentagon dilemma in Seed Destiny, he actually doesn't have many real friendships, at least beyond surface level. Even Lacus, his ex-fiancée, and Shin, his mentee who he personally took under his wing with disastrous results, aren't too close beyond battle comrades. especially the former when he outright rejects her offer of consolation, when he uncharacteristically loses control of his emotions. There's a lot of pent-up rage in that massive forehead of his. Doesn't matter if he's hurt emotionally or physically, he'll just brush it off and insist he's fine to avoid further discussion. But an awkward conversation involving crabs with a complete stranger on a remote island somehow gets him to talk.
カニがそんなにおかしいかよいや失礼あんまり経験がないんでねこういうことは
On the flip side, Kigali is immediately able to cut to the chase and befriend others without much effort. She's not the most eloquent of speakers, but her words are sincere and has good intentions. Unless you're Flay, then she'll have a special face of disgust reserved just for you. Maybe it's her political upbringing of being able to work the crowd to her advantage, but she gets along with people much better and easier than her hamster-brained significant other. However different these two may be, a uniting commonality is that both prefer to maintain their independence, at times to their own detriment. When Athearn and Kigali interact, there's a tenderness in their eyes and voice, the tone reserved only for those who you can wholly trust and let your guard down. Even from their first encounter as enemies, you could tell that Athearn had a bit of a soft spot for the unruly princess, enough so that he'd laugh and joke around with the girl who had tried to kill him earlier in one scene, then reveal something as deeply personal and traumatic to him like his mother's death in another. Who is this troublemaker and why does she act in the most unconventional manner? Badgers me incessantly by demanding answers. She lashes out at me, her captor, and I see complete disregard for the rules that puts herself in the face of danger? Keep in mind, this is a big deal for someone as closed off like Athearn. He isn't the most open when it comes to letting his feelings be known, and prefers to bottle them to avoid awkward confrontations.
君何
You can sense the affection between them. They're constantly on each other's minds, as shown during their time apart in Seed Destiny, and there's a level of silent attentiveness in their behavior. Little moments like Kigali's face lighting up at the mention of Athearn's return. You can see how well she knows him when she's the only one who recognizes Red Knight codename. Or her choosing to stay aboard the Minerva while he was playing his part in preventing the colony drop. Not exactly subtle when you're trying to keep your relationship under wraps, but okay. Look, Kigali's just really concerned for her bodyguard's safety. There's a shortage on reliable security, so she doesn't want the trouble of looking for a replacement. Totally nothing going on between her and Alex Dino. They might be in a relationship in every sense of the word, but their strong sense of duty holds them back from pursuing one on their own terms. Because it's not a friend or a family member keeping them apart. It's an entire political and social system. She's a natural, he's a coordinator, and that alone puts them at odds with the ideologies of the world majority that the two are trying to change. That genetic prejudice can be overcome when both parties look past superficial differences. In Seed Destiny, that task becomes even more Herculean when their family names they've showed little interest in is tying them down like the proverbial ball and chain. Kigali now being the leader of a country doesn't mean that she has the freedom to choose any partner, unless the man in question has the support of her people or risk political suicide. And Athearn, while being hailed as a war hero who forgoes valor and glory to serve his lady, cannot evade the fact that his father was the previous chairman who tried to exterminate the naturals, and that would understandably make the general public be skittish of his character.
君も僕もナチュラルだ。どの道無理な話なんだよ。コーディネーターの彼とは所詮生きる世界が違う。
When these two are in harmony, their strengths cover each other's weaknesses. Kigali, being the nurturing type, despite her rough exterior, teaches him to be accepting of himself, imperfections and all, and to open up to others. Athearn in turn smooths out the rough edges of her personality and provides the calm, rational perspective to her emotional, fiery side. But when they clash, they can be like oil and water, a fight between two immovable objects made of pure stubbornness to see who can bend the knee first. As funny as it sounds, Athearn has a track record of destructive and selfish behavior despite his benevolent demeanor. In Seed, he confronted his father head-on, knowing full well of the consequences that would await him, but he insisted on going because knowing his truth, not the truth, his truth specifically, was apparently more important than staying put and ensuring his side still had a fighting chance in stopping the war. In Sea Destiny, instead of guiding the Minerva crew when morale was low like what a competent leader does, Athrun was seen moping around in his miserable self while the team was left to pick up the pieces to their disappointment. At home, he ditched Kigali and rejoined Zaft, claiming that it's for the benefit of Orb. Yes, he actually said that, feel free to laugh at him. Yet, the decision was fueled largely on his behalf of atoning for his father's sins in his own twisted version of handing justice, only to leave Kigali alone and fend for herself against the cabinet who didn't have their country's best interest in mind. It's not a question of wanting to be with him, it's more of, are you able to put up with him? Athrun's selfishness reached new heights when he suddenly put a ring on her, and for some reason thought it was enough for Kigali to buck the system for him. This ended up placing more strain in their relationship by forcing her to choose between him or her country when she wasn't at liberty to make that call, especially when the world was teetering into another war. The first time I saw this as a preteen, I used to think it was endearing, but now I think it's highly inappropriate, bordering on possessive, watching it as a decrepit adult in my 30s. What was initially perceived as a lovely gesture of commitment is a move predicated on a poorly thought out, one-sided jealousy. Think about it. Athrun was not in a good headspace after fighting terrorists who attempted Operation British 2.0 in support of his dead father's genocidal vision, and Kigali was in the middle of fighting back a concerted push to align Orb with the militant Earth Alliance. Both were mentally exhausted from seeing the world fall apart before their eyes after trying so hard to keep the peace. And then Athrun decides to go on the offense with a ring that was preceded by him professing of his disapproval of Yuna.
ユーナ・ロマとのことは分かってはいるけど。え？やっぱり面白くはないから。
Now, is that bad writing for Murasawa? In retrospect, no. Just because certain events in the story don't go your way or no immediate resolution is provided, doesn't automatically mean it's bad, considering the roles of these two have changed so much since the end of Seed. As I mentioned before, Seed and notably Seed Destiny is a narrative of growing pains. It's an awkward transitional period for these characters, especially for Kigali now being 18 with their responsibilities suddenly piled on like a ton of bricks. Running a country, the endless meetings and negotiations behind open and closed doors, paving a way for the future and well-being of your citizens. It's a thankless job that sacrifices so much but gives so little, where compassion alone cannot solve complex socioeconomic problems. You're no longer just Kigali, you're Representative Atha, a symbol of the nation further perpetuated by your father's legacy. Of course, these two are going to encounter bumps on the road when they're in such precarious conditions. Bear in mind, Athrun lost everything by the end of Seed. With the death of his father, he lost his remaining familial connection to his homeland, and those who matter to him the most are now in Orb. So for him, it's easier to uproot his life and relocate, as long as he's near the person he loves, which I'm willing to suspect is why he couldn't comprehend why Kigali was so attached to her country. She too witnessed her father's death like he did, but her willingness to sacrifice herself for a nation that was the source of her stress confused him. Around this time, I wouldn't be surprised if Athrun had harbored some resentment regarding Kigali's father, not because he was envious of her for having a loving parent or disagrees with him ideologically, but for chaining his only daughter to a life of servitude to the country.
かがりさんも頑張ったんだろうとは思いますけど。
代表といってもまだ18の女の子にこの情勢の中での政治は難しすぎる。
In retrospect, the Junius 7 incident in Sea Destiny was a turning point for them, because this was the moment when they began to close off their hearts to each other. Kigali is one of the very few who Athrun can be fully honest with. She's the only one he opened up to after he gets depressed for failing to reason with his father. In this scene, she casually asks him if he's alright, which he answers, yes. We know this isn't true, as he was clearly disturbed from fighting against the terrorists who hung on to his father's words. However, Kigali believes the lie and inadvertently hurts him by congratulating the team for doing their job. Furthermore, she learns of the truth behind the colony drop not from Athrun, but from Shin of all people.
やめろよこのバカ！また？自爆した奴らのリーダーが最後に言ったんだ。俺たちコーディネーターにとってパトリック・ザラの取った道こそが唯一正しいものだってさ。
At that moment, Athrun likely concluded this is an issue he must handle alone, for this is a burden unique to him that Kigali cannot fathom. This was some next-level short-sightedness because she was dealing with her own internal struggles concerning her father and living up to the Atha name. Kigali can no longer throw a tantrum and kick sand in annoyance like she did in Seed. It's unacceptable behavior for a politician, and level-headed diplomacy and negotiations are tools of the trade. Her childishly lashing out at her cabinet in the early episodes of Seed Destiny is not the result of her character regressing, but is the desperation of a novice politician trying to reason with those who have decades more experience than her. Obviously, she's going to feel backed into a corner with no viable options. One of the big reasons why I hated Seed Destiny initially was because of how awful Kigali was handled. Wherever she went, she was lambasted and ridiculed from both sides for her myopic decisions. And you couldn't blame them because they were right. Where was Best Girl and what have they done to her?
私はオーブの代表だぞ。私だっていろいろ悩んで考えて、
それで決めた大西洋連邦との同盟やセイランさんとの結婚が本当にオーブのためになるとカガリは本気で思ってるの？
But thinking back, I think it was a necessary move, and even more so with the movie in context. The experiences Kigali went through in Seed are different in Seed Destiny. The big caveat was that she had her father's backing that gave credence to her actions. With that critical support system gone in the sequel, she had to find her own voice, and by extension, her own source of power. Something that made Orb's government respect her for who she is with her own accomplishments without falling back on the name of her predecessor. Was it a rough 40-ish episodes getting there? Yes, but it all worked out in the end.
ウナとは市長会は一体何を？
だが仕方なかろう。同盟を結ぶということはそういうことだ。
こうなるとは思ってなかった。
私は
そう言わないの。私たちだってあの時強引にカガリさんを連れてきちゃって。彼女がオーブにいたらこんなことにだけはならなかったかもしれないのよ。
いえ、同じことだったと思いますよ。あの時のカガリにこれが止められたとは思えない。
If Seed was about discovering said relationship, then Seed Destiny was about trying to hold on to that weakening connection before it spirals out of control. War brought them together initially, but it also drove them apart in the sequel. Doubt, insecurities, and misunderstandings. All of these feelings previously unfamiliar to them begin to bubble and surface as the characters transition to adulthood, and responsibilities amount to more than just looking out for your immediate friends and surviving on the battlefield. One lost her headstrong confidence from being an inexperienced leader as its symbolic mother and protectorate against self-interested factions within her own government. The other grew impatient adjusting to civilian life, while he watched the woman he loves shoulder all the burden. Being powerless on the political front is one thing, but powerless to protect her who's right in front of you when it's your job, it's a double whammy of frustrations for an overthinker like Athrun. Even more so with this blithering twit able to pursue her without any obstacles. Yuna may be vain, a coward, and horribly incompetent as a leader, but he's observant and has high aspirations. It's obvious he has no love for Kigali whatsoever, and it's her political position of power that he desires. He would exploit her weakened state by feigning sympathy to her situation in private, before berating her in front of everyone to undermine her authority.
Yuna! 国はあなたのおもちゃではない。いい加減、干渉で物を言うのはやめなさい。
This vindictive side goes even further by openly flirting with Kigali in front of Athrun, knowing he would take it personally. It's a spiteful mental back and forth between two potential suitors over a girl to see who can destroy the other. And unfortunately, the victim in their charades is Kigali, who is caught in their crossfire. To choose Yuna was her greatest act of altruism, because it meant giving up her happiness for the perceived welfare of her country. Her friends, her loved ones, any independence she retained would be surrendered if she were to continue on that cursed path. Meanwhile, this was the ultimate backstab to Athrun because it was confirmation to him that he lost. He is second place. the spare to be discarded and no longer useful to Kigali, when in reality this was far from the case. I'm sure the thought of her being whisked away by another man, not because of the qualities of his character, but because he abused his honored status, offended Athrun to no end. After all, Alex Dino on record is just a lowly bodyguard who just happens to be really dedicated to his job in protecting Kigali Yola Atha, the woman who on paper is betrothed to Yuna Roma Seiran from childhood. Everything about him is a lie. His relationship, his identity and orb, it's all just a fabrication and nothing is real. Maybe that's why he put a ring on Kigali as a last-ditch effort to ensure the one thing that matters to him is real and cannot be taken away.
それで私のことは許してくれるか？
それは俺の方だろう。謝るのはクレタでキラに言われたことを俺は。
私は結婚しようとした。お前に何も言わずに。
守りたかったんだろう。
The Savior Gundam reflects Athrun's time in Zaft in Seed Destiny. It's a mobile suit personally given to him by Durandal, but it's not designed to his strengths and he never used it to its full potential. Its decimation by the Freedom was during his lowest point, and when he started to break away from being under the chairman's influence. The fact that the Legend, a long-range unit, was originally meant to be the Savior's successor to Athrun shows that he was further being shuffled into a role that doesn't align with his views, and Durandal was trying to coax him back into his circle of influence. And like its name, Athrun seems to display a bit of a savior complex based on his actions. He fashioned himself as the protector of the four, kinda like the self-appointed nosy brother who keeps interfering on your behalf.
大丈夫だよ、アスラ。もう僕もラクスもだからそんなに一人で頑張んなくていいからね。
This is despite demonstrating numerous times throughout the series of his incompetence in that role and being called out on it. The guy is a basket full of contradictions, graduates at the top of the military academy, yet allows his feelings to intervene on the battlefield. Thinks he is pragmatic and has a better grasp on the workings of humanity, gets verbally curb-stomped by a couple who have been living in isolation from the world for the last 2 years. He desired the power to carry out the changes he envisioned, gets manipulated by a man who has definitely never betrayed anyone in his life.
I've never betrayed anyone in my entire life. Ever!
Believes he is the most responsible and capable in his group, but spent the majority of the time, especially in Seed Destiny, getting bailed out by others. Makes it a personal mission to protect his girl, almost allows her to get married off to another guy by leaving her at a time when she needed his support the most. To the audience, all of his actions look irrational and easy to fix, but as the outside observer, we're able to take a step back and rationally assess the forest from the trees.
どうされましたか？
これで良かったのかなって思って。
It's not until the latter half of Seed Destiny when Athrun finally realizes his myopic approach and learns to back off and let people grow at their own pace. It took a while, and what's admirable with these two is that they never choose the easy route. They could easily break off their relationship permanently, but no matter how difficult that journey is, they're determined to find a solution. And I'm so glad that was shown in Seed Freedom, because they've been through so much together just to throw it all away. Their arc was mostly finished with the conclusion of Seed Destiny, and Athrun only shows up halfway into the movie, while Kigali had less than 15 minutes of screen time, but it was undeniable their presence was strongly felt, culminating in the final battle when their piloting teamwork was put to the test. Even if the moments were sparse, these two acting with the confidence instilled post-Seed Destiny was such a joy to watch. Watching Athrun clobber Kira to his senses with a clear mind and unburdened by his past was delivered with so much natural swagger. It's a refreshing side of him, finally being the one who knocks sense into the holier-than-thou Jesus Yamato after being on the receiving end for the longest time. And with that authority, he's finally become the reliable one he's always viewed himself as, and a source of assurance to his team during darker times. Not to mention he developed a bit of sass that's been a pleasant addition to his personality.
心を読めるんじゃなかったのか。使えないな。
Kigali is no longer the greenhorn, timid politician prone to coercion. She's a veteran navigating through orb politics with a capable mind and an iron grip while retaining her signature fiery temper. She's no longer just a figurehead. She embraces the challenges of being a representative and mentoring the next generation of leaders. Their growth makes the appearance of enduring Seed Destiny worth it. That after almost 20 years of the audience being metaphorically trapped inside a dark tunnel that is the uncertainty of their future, they patched things up and finally got out together. What used to be doubt and insecurity in their bond has been replaced with a deep sense of trust, while being at their core the same characters we grew to know and love, but an improved version. A pair who learned from a culmination of their past heartbreak and are now confidently walking towards the same path as one, and I can't help but feel proud of how far they've come. Even if Atherin's choice of wearing fingerless gloves as fashionable accessories is questionable. Then again, this is someone who thinks a lemon yellow turtleneck and a red bathrobe is acceptable outside attire.
では、おやすみなさい。
大変そうですわね、アスランも。ハロ、あかんで。
Of course, one cannot talk about the Gundam Seed trilogy as a whole without talking about the fated pair, the ultimate duo, Jesus and Mary Magdalene themselves, Kira and Lacus.
Kira! Lex! よかった。
Kira!
こうして君がここにいる。それが本当に嬉しい。
私もですわ。
A couple who are so OP that they're trying to one-up each other to see who's more godlike. Even though they were one of the main characters in previous iterations, Seed Freedom was made with the intention of focusing squarely on them, because if anyone deserved to have their turn of being dragged through the mud, Seed Destiny style, it's these two. After being nothing but correct and chastising others for not complying with their views, Kira and Lacus finally have their turn in the hot seat. This time suffering from the aftermath of their decision to reject the Destiny plan. In the movie, Kira is visibly exhausted by the endless fighting. If there's a word to describe him here, it's brittle. He has always been on the more delicate side, and what's remaining of his sanity is now at his breaking point, and isolating himself further from his loved ones is certainly not helping his mental state. From the beginning, Kira's life has been about escalations of his self-imposed responsibilities. At first, he just wanted to protect his friends, then wanted to protect the Archangel and crew. Later, he reunited with Kigali, then wanted to protect Orb and its people. Eventually, he's with Lacus, and now he wants to protect the world from people like Le Creuset and Durandal. Kira took being kind to a whole new level, accentuated by his low self-esteem by viewing himself as little more than being the sword to his girlfriend's words. Seed Freedom is a story where he's coping in a life that he isn't comfortable with, so he retreats further into his mind without reaching out for the help that he used to berate others for previously. Out of the main cast, he's the only one who's been forcibly dragged into the war. Atherin, Shin, and possibly Luna were directly affected as well, but they enlisted in the military on their own volition. And even though Lacus and Kigali aren't officially soldiers on record, they were born into political backgrounds, so there's at least the assumption that they are aware from a young age of their impending responsibilities. Kira's just some programming dude who just wanted to be left alone and got pressured into piloting because he's good at it. The guy can barely shoot a gun or land a punch, yet he has the rank equivalent of an admiral in Seed Destiny and made a commodore in Seed Freedom. What I find frustrating with him is that his train of thought is depressingly simple-minded throughout. Go with whatever Lacus thinks, and this sentiment unfortunately remains the same throughout. There is no visible pushback or argument between them, and a general lack of independence in both action and thought. The answer is whatever Milady thinks, I am at her service and will follow accordingly. Whatever makes her happy, I'm happy too. It's a strange codependency these two have established, almost on the line of a caretaker relationship, and it becomes more evident in the movie just how much they really need to be with each other at all times. At the end of the day, I see Kira as a pitiable character. Not the most well-written or compelling, but a sympathetic one that the average person can relate to.
ギラ
僕は行くよ。
どちらへ行かれますの？
地球へ戻らなきゃ。
なぜあなたを一人戻ったところで戦いは終わりませんわ。
でもここでただ見ていることももうできない。何もできないって言って何もしなかったらもっと何もできない。何も変わらない。何も終わらないから。
Up to See Destiny, Lacus has been the master manipulator of the series. Her words alone can tilt the odds of the outcome, and how she's remained unchanged as the pristine, picture-perfect individual has been one of my biggest problems with the series. If you don't know, I detest Lacus Clyne.
そうですか？
She is my most hated person in a work of fiction, and I find her unbearable with her existence acting as a cheat code for her side. Everything from her one-note calmness, her immunity from any form of criticism, the cadence in her voice, especially when she starts lecturing battle-hardened soldiers to put down their guns like they're attending a U2 concert, is honestly insulting and comes off as ignorant. I find her to be a hypocrite in the highest order and a general lack of progression who always has the right answers to everyone's problems. I think is a major disservice to the writing of Seed and See Destiny. To me, she is not a character. She is the embodiment of an ideal, a hollow shell that spews messages of peace, love, and unity from a cushy throne.
全チャンネルで通信回線を開いてください。私はラクスクラインです。願う未来の違いから、私たちはザラ議長と敵対するものとなってしまいましたが、私はあなた方との戦闘を望みません。どうか船を行かせてください。そして皆さんももう一度、私たちが本当に戦わなければならぬのは何なのか、考えてみてください。
If you're a fan of Lacus, more power to you. But I personally cannot stand this pink creature from the Black Lagoon who talks like an automatic quote generator. So when it was finally her time to be in the hot seat, it was a welcome change because we witnessed a side of her that was needed more than any other person in the series. Seed Freedom's greatest achievement to me, and I didn't think it was possible, is how it made me feel a twinge of sympathy for Lacus. This resulted in her becoming a more deified character than Kira in the end, but seeing her in a sorry, pitiful state, albeit temporarily, and acting with a personal urgency were necessary trade-offs. When people say that the plot of Seed Freedom is basically Kira and Lacus getting the Seed Destiny treatment, it literally is that. Elements concerning their relationship have already been repeated with different characters, even down to her ring having its own significance when she emotionally tethered herself to a piece of jewelry just like Kigali did previously. In the movie, Lacus is a woman who worries, doubts, and feels overwhelmed when her feet are held to the fire. She's now in a delicate position in both her personal and professional life, showing signs of weakness when having to make a decision, something that was easy for her previously. The problem is twofold. She no longer has the freedom to move around and do what she pleases, and also feels guilty for prolonging Kira's suffering as the fighting continues. So she decides to accelerate things, hoping that it will realize their vision of a peaceful world quicker.
しかし、何度かお会いしてはいますが、不思議な男ですな、大和隊長は。およそ戦場には似つかわしくない静かな印象ですが。今はこの戦争の矛盾を一人で背負おうとしているようだ。
優しいのです、彼は。
One of my favorite scenes in the movie is the interaction between Lacus and Kigali discussing Foundation's request to join Compass, because it doubles as a talk between friends while illustrating how the tables have turned post-Seed Destiny. During their online meeting, Kigali is animated, focused, and controlling the flow of the conversation. A far cry from the novice politician she was just a few years ago. Meanwhile, Lacus is withdrawn, averts her eyes, and almost seems to shrink back into her seat. She is obviously unhappy in her current circumstance, and allows her mind to wander. Even though these two share the same vision for the world and a similar political upbringing, their priorities diverge. Orb will always come first to Kigali. her and Athrun have already crossed that bridge, where they've reached a mutual level of acceptance, whereas Lacus is at a crossroad where she's trying to have her cake and eat it too. It's an interesting dichotomy between these two women. Seed Destiny portrayed a conclusion where both embarked on a similar path, but it deviates in the movie. One chose to continue her work in public office and delay her pursuance of love and happiness, while the other walked away from a promising career to a quiet life away from the spotlight to be at her partner's side. Establishing Compass has been a monumental step towards achieving a better world, but it came at the expense of Kira's well-being, who has no choice but to continue being a soldier because he's a strong asset. Lacus now has the power to directly enact change, but realizes is much happier being by Kira's side and their jobs keep them apart for extended periods. Their time together is limited, and when they're able to take a day off, it's spent talking about their work instead of addressing the problems in their relationship. They still deeply care for each other, but something feels off. One brushes away his personal grievances aside, while the other hesitates and quietly fears the distance between them continuing to grow. It seems their troubles have been apparent for a while. Lacus is shown having nightmares of Kira drifting away from her, going back to when he was still wearing the Zafta uniform. Her fear of losing him feels real, because after being asleep on the wheel throughout Seed Destiny, both have to wake up and grab onto the steering wheel before the car that is their relationship veers off to the curb and bursts into flames. Both cannot bring themselves to confront their problems to each other because they're afraid of compromising their duties and risk losing the progress they've made. Both inadvertently place their value of being a worthy partner on their ability to create a better world, even though the most important component to that equation is simply being by each other's side.
でもラクス、もし君が
大丈夫ですわ。
As much as Seed Freedom will be remembered for its funny and ridiculous moments, it's a pretty hopeless timeline where at its conclusion, there hasn't been much, if any, social progress in the end. Even if the nations are governed by the right people with the best intentions, there's still a deep divide between the two races with no signs of reconciliation. After being in decline, the extremist factions are revitalized thanks to the knowledge of the Accords, and a good chunk of the Coordinator population would view the Destiny plan as favorable because they'd be treated as the preferred group. It's an unfortunate reminder that armed conflict is endless, and one mistake can spoil all the effort that was put into it. Despite the blood, sweat, and tears Kira and Lacus and co have poured into their work, arguably it was all futile that only left their minds battered and worn, leaving what remains of the Compass crew to carry on in their absence. Even though their relationship has reconciled and is stronger than ever, but at what cost? Countless lives, global instability, and authorities looking to exploit them for personal gain. But hey, at least they still have each other, am I right? It may be selfish of them to prioritize their own happiness, but that's been consistently one of the anime's central themes throughout the story, the importance of personal choice and forging your own path, versus following a predetermined future that you are best suited for. Lacus has a knack for politics and knows her powers are greatly needed to ensure humanity moves towards the right direction, but she will happily choose the one with Kira even if it means plunging the world back into uncertainty. By throwing away the ring she wore throughout the movie, Lacus freed herself from the destiny that was decided for her, and an emphatic rejection of the path that she was supposed to follow. What was once a memento of her mother that she treasured was now a reminder of the dark past she never wants to go back to. She is now free to pursue a future with Kira, someone who loves her for who she is and not because of what she is and represents.
ラクスに会いたい。ラクス、ただ隣で笑っていてほしいだけなのに、僕にはもうどうしたらいいのかわからない。
I'm probably looking into this too much, but Seed Freedom inadvertently ended up disagreeing with the new type theory in the Universal Century. To summarize, the new type theory is the belief that humanity is destined to leave Earth for space as the next stage of evolution. To adapt to these changes, mankind will eventually develop psychic-esque abilities, such as heightened spatial awareness and telepathy, in order to communicate with others without any misconceptions. While unspoken mutual exchanges is certainly an accomplishment between people, that alone is not enough. Complete understanding between partners must also be conveyed verbally, because the person in question is making the conscious decision to reach out and open up to that individual. The reason may not be important, the conversations may be redundant and not always pleasant, but it's the honest effort to maintain that connection that matters. Humans are social creatures regardless of their upbringing or how much they evolve, and no matter how well you know someone inside and out, they cannot understand the contents of your heart unless you voice it. Lacus realized that making her feelings ambiguous only brought apathy towards Kira, to the point where he wrongfully concluded she had fallen out of love with him. When you love someone, you say it, because it's a feeling that's meant to be shared with your other half, even if it means declaring to the enemy during a rescue mission that you emphatically love this person out loud in the cheesiest way possible.
それでも愛してるって言えるの？ああ、その目が見えなくても、声が失われても、ラクスはラクスだ。僕はその全てを愛している。キラ。
It's been a wild journey seeing the tide of opinion on the Seed trilogy change so drastically leading up to the movie's release, and witnessing people reignite their appreciation for the series is a testament to the phrase that time heals all wounds.
ほら、食べろって、お前も。
Now is the opportunity for some, including myself, to come out of the cockpit and acknowledge that they love Gundam Seed. In the almost 20 years I've known this anime, I've gone from being an avowed hater, avoiding everything and anything Fukuda participated in, then grudgingly acknowledging its existence, then enjoying it as a guilty pleasure by viewing it as a comedy, and now as a fan who will gladly look out for his future stuff. And I think it's because this anime elicited such strong emotions from me, both good and bad, that I'm leaving with a heavy heart. Guilty as charged, I'm a reformed member of the Church of Jesus Yamato and his antics, and I have no regrets on joining. We all know popularity doesn't always equate to good writing, but that doesn't mean no one can get something out of it. Gundam Seed is an evergreen property for a reason, and it's something that everybody seems to have a strong opinion on. And for it to have the power to do that to people decades later without much additional content is an accomplishment not many anime can achieve.
藤吉さんは荒らぎ派ですか？白樺派ですか？
荒らぎ。強いて言うなら、アスカガ派ですけど。
アスカガ派ですか？
It covers a wide net of genres that appeals to a broad viewership for a variety of reasons. Some love it for the romance and pretty characters, others for the mecha designs and battles, or at least what's not recycled. The scope of its popularity really didn't hit me until I tuned into one of their music party live streams, and at its peak reached over 100,000 concurrent viewers. Because it's one thing to know and read about its fame, but to witness it firsthand was a whole new experience. That was when I realized just how big of a phenomenon this show is, and just how much it resonated with people. Seed and Seed Destiny were capable of producing massive high points, and at the same time, some of the most frustrating and mind-boggling moments. It's a series that knows when to turn on the melodrama spigot through a combination of audio and visual cues that even in its worst parts were able to capture. A good chunk of my enjoyment in this journey came from watching people who, with similar opinions of the series to mine, shared the same sentiments and participated on the fun. And with it, I've seen new memes being made, and old ones resurface after 20 years on the internet. At the end of it all, the question remains, is it really worth it to hold a grudge on an anime for that long? Maybe not. Time has passed, and with it, opinions have changed. The only thing that's remained the same is the show itself, as a reminder of what things were like during that period. The Gundam Seed trilogy may not be the multi-course Michelin-starred meal crafted to enlighten your taste buds, but more akin to a Greg's sausage roll. It's not nutritious by any means, and it's basically processed junk food. But man, does it taste magical for the price, and upon trying it for the first time, you understand why it's enjoyed by many. Is Gundam Seed Freedom a fan service movie? I think the fact that it was made after almost 20 years in limbo is arguably one itself. Does that mean it's inherently bad? Of course not. Fukuda at times is a crowd pleaser, spontaneous, and enjoys the spotlight. but I believe there's talent in being able to identify what your audience wants and tapping into that dedication. Because even if you're the creator, you have to play the delicate balancing game against what you want versus what the audience wants. To me, Seed Freedom is a work that not only managed to satisfy its core supporters, but converted those who were previously critical of it into fans. It's a film that makes it crystal clear that Fukuda, the staff, and posthumously Murasawa truly love their creation. You may disagree with its intentions, you may disagree with the results, you may even disapprove of its existence, but it's undeniable how much the team and contributors are attached to the series and wanted to create a proper send-off. Gundam Seed Freedom finished not in a whisper, nor as a fizzle fading into the distance, but in a massive show of fireworks. It's the gut punch of nostalgia that gives me the giggles from its absurdity. It prioritizes on pure entertainment that builds from its prequels, and as a result feeds off on the passion and enjoyment from everyone who had a hand in its creation. A central theme throughout the film was love, and I could feel that sentiment encompassing it throughout its duration. From the voice acting, music, animation, mecha design, and art, this is an experience focused entirely on unfiltered fun, and an example where even some of its harshest critics can't help but chuckle at the final result. Few times am I left speechless in utter joy from beginning to end, and I found myself laughing with it, not at it.
あら、知らなかったの？おめでたいわね。
I went into this with a cautious smile and left with a goofy grin on my face, knowing that I've watched something truly special. While I participated in its mockery and openly expressed my dislike for this series over the years, it's been an emotional journey watching all of this play out from beginning to end. And now that it's over, I feel sad knowing that I'm closing a significant part of my childhood, not just as a Gundam fan, but an anime fan overall. After all, you don't love Gundam because you need it. You need Gundam because you love it. Godspeed, Fukuda, you lovable mad lad.
なんだフリーダキラこの戦いは終わりが見えない人は簡単には変われない
だが言ってみればそれが今のこの世界ということだ
私と君は敵同士だということだな
戦って辛くて守れなくて辛くてすぐ泣いて必要だから愛するのではありません愛しているから必要なのです
違うんだって俺なんかとは違うんだってだが君にできること君が望むことそれは君自身が一番よく知っているはずだ
あいつらこんなこといつまで続けるんすか何ができて何ができないのかも分かってない
いつかきっとまた手を取り合える時が来るわあなたたちは
私なら大丈夫ですわ必ず帰ってきますあなたのもと逃げるな生きる方が戦いだ
強さは力じゃない生きる意志だ